A Supreme Court decision just dropped, and it quietly reshaped one of the most important constitutional protections you have during a traffic stop. No 5-4 split, no ideological fight, no dissent, 9 justices, 0 disagreement. When that happens, you pay attention. Because when the Supreme Court speaks unanimously on the Fourth Amendment, it means something fundamental just shifted in American law. And if you legally carry a firearm, or if you ever get pulled over, this ruling could one day determine whether a tragedy is exposed or buried. Let's break down what just happened and why it matters more than most people realize. The case that changed everything. On May 15, 2025, the United States Supreme Court issued a unanimous 9-0 decision in Barnes v. Felix. At first glance, it sounds like just another civil rights case. But beneath the surface, it addresses a critical constitutional question. When courts judge whether a police shooting was legal, are they allowed to look at the full encounter, or only the final split second before the trigger was pulled? That question might sound technical. It's not. It's the difference between constitutional accountability and constitutional blindfolding. The Fourth Amendment. What it actually means. The Fourth Amendment protects you against unreasonable searches and seizures. Most people think about searches, traffic stops, home searches, pat-downs. But here's something many don't realize. When police shoot someone, that is legally considered a seizure under the Fourth Amendment. Deadly force is the ultimate seizure, so the Constitution requires that it be objectively reasonable. The key word there is reasonable, and that's where this case comes in. Because for years, several federal courts were using a rule that dramatically narrowed how reasonableness was evaluated. The moment of threat, Rule 4. Federal circuit courts, including the powerful Fifth Circuit covering Texas, Louisiana, and Mississippi, adopted something known as the moment of threat rule. Under that rule, courts were instructed to look only at the precise instant when the officer perceived a threat, not the minute before, not the decisions leading up to it, not whether the officer created the danger, just the final moment. If during that final second, a reasonable officer could claim fear for their life, the use of deadly force was often upheld. Everything else? Legally irrelevant. Let that sink in. Imagine a scenario where an officer makes escalating decisions that increase tension, makes aggressive moves, ignores de-escalation, and then, in the chaos created by those choices, perceives a threat. Under the old rule, courts could ignore everything leading up to that final flashpoint. It's like watching only the last 2 seconds of a movie and pretending you understand the plot. The facts of Barnes v. Felix now. Let's talk about what actually happened. April 28, 2016. Highway outside Houston, Texas. A constable named Roberto Felix received a radio alert regarding unpaid toll violations connected to a vehicle's license plate. Routine enforcement stop. He pulled the driver over. The driver was Ashian Barnes. Felix approached the vehicle and requested license and insurance. Barnes told him he didn't have his physical license on him. The car was a rental in his girlfriend's name. Felix told Barnes to stop searching around inside the vehicle. Felix claimed he smelled marijuana. Barnes said his ID might be in the trunk. Felix instructed him to pop the trunk from inside the vehicle. Barnes complied, but he also restarted the ignition, and this is where everything changed. Felix opened the driver's side door and drew his firearm. Barnes began to drive away. In response, Felix jumped onto the moving vehicle, physically climbing onto the doorsill as the car began moving forward. He shouted commands. Within approximately 2 seconds of jumping onto the moving car, Felix fired 2 shots into the vehicle. Barnes was struck and later died. The entire sequence, from vehicle movement to stop, lasted about 5 seconds. 2 seconds from jump to gunfire. 2 seconds. That's what the lower courts focused on. How the lower courts ruled Barnes's mother filed a lawsuit under federal civil rights law, alleging excessive force in violation of the Fourth Amendment. But both the District Court and the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals applied the moment of threat rule. They ruled that only the final seconds mattered. At that moment, when Felix was hanging on to a moving car, a reasonable officer could fear serious injury. Therefore, the shooting was constitutional. Full stop. The fact that Felix chose to jump onto the vehicle? Legally irrelevant. The fact that he escalated the encounter by opening the door and drawing his weapon? Irrelevant. Only the final 2 seconds counted. And that is precisely what the Supreme Court rejected. The Supreme Court steps in Justice Elena Kagan wrote the unanimous opinion, and she did not mince words. The court held that the Fourth Amendment requires analysis of the totality of the circumstances, not a frozen snapshot, not a narrow time slice, the entire encounter. The court stated that judges cannot evaluate reasonableness if they are forced to wear what Justice Kagan described as chronological blinders. That phrase is powerful, because constitutional rights don't operate in isolation from reality. Context matters. Actions have consequences, and reasonableness must be measured in light of everything that happened, not just the final spark. Why this matters so much? This decision doesn't automatically mean the shooting was unconstitutional. The court did not say that. Instead, it said the lower courts used the wrong legal framework. The case was sent back down to be evaluated again, this time looking at the full timeline. And that changes the legal landscape going forward. Because now, across the entire country, courts must consider what happened before the perceived threat. Did the officer escalate unnecessarily? Did the officer create the danger? Were there reasonable alternatives? Were commands clear or contradictory? Was the stop itself lawful? Everything becomes relevant, and that's a major shift. Why this especially matters for gun owners. If you legally carry a firearm, traffic stops can be tense. You're balancing compliance with constitutional rights. You're making split-second decisions about movement and communication. And so is the officer. Under the old moment of threat approach, a court might look only at the instant your hand moved, even if you were complying with a command. Under the new standard, courts must ask, what were you told to do? Did the officer's commands create confusion? Was the officer aware of the firearm before issuing instructions? Were safer alternatives available? That broader lens provides a more honest review of what actually happened, not just what happened in the final flash, not anti-police, not pro-police, pro-constitution. One of the most telling aspects of this case is its unanimity. Justice Kavanaugh wrote a concurring opinion emphasizing the dangers officers face during traffic stops. He acknowledged that these are high-risk, rapidly evolving encounters. And yet, even with that recognition, he joined the unanimous opinion requiring full context analysis. That's significant. This isn't about undermining law enforcement. It's about constitutional consistency. The Fourth Amendment doesn't disappear because situations are tense, and it doesn't become optional in the final seconds of an encounter. What this decision does not do, it does not eliminate qualified immunity, ban police from using deadly force, automatically invalidate prior shootings, guarantee plaintiffs win lawsuits. What it does is prevent courts from artificially narrowing the story. It ensures the Constitution is applied to the whole encounter, not just the most convenient fragment. And that matters, because constitutional rights only work when courts are allowed to see the full picture.